Buying a theme park means taking responsibility for its maintenance schedule before you ever sell a ticket. At 6 in the morning, long before the music begins and the parking booths open, a technician checks the restraint on your largest roller coaster. One sensor does not respond correctly. The train cannot be released. Now the owner has a decision to make. Keep the ride closed and disappoint the guests who came specifically for it, or spend whatever is necessary to diagnose the problem before the gates open. That single restraint can affect much more than one attraction. A delayed coaster pushes guests toward other queues. Longer lines reduce the time available for lunch, games, gift shops, and other purchases. Complaints reach customer service. Refund requests begin appearing. The parking lot may look full, while the park produces a financially weak day. The attraction brings people through the gate. Your job is to convert a limited number of safe, enjoyable hours into enough spending to support an operation that never stops requiring money. The version of the business you choose changes almost every number. A small children's park may depend on birthday parties, local memberships, and parents with young children. An indoor attraction can operate through winter, although it usually has less space and lower daily capacity. A destination resort combines rides with hotels, restaurants, transportation, and intellectual property. That model can keep guests for several days, but the development cost belongs in an entirely different category. For an independent investment group, a regional theme park is a more realistic target. Most guests arrive by car from a few hours away. The park has several roller coasters, family rides, a children's area, food stands, games, gift shops, parking, and perhaps a connected water park. Summer carries most of the season. Weekends and seasonal events help extend the calendar. For the rest of this ownership scenario, assume you are buying an established regional park rather than developing one on empty land. It receives about 1 million to 1.5 million visits in a normal year. The brand is known locally, the utility infrastructure already exists, and the rides have operating histories you can inspect. That may sound safer than building from scratch. The risk has simply changed. A new park gives you construction risk. An existing park gives you inherited machinery, aging electrical systems, deferred maintenance, employee habits, customer expectations, and a reputation that may have been forming for decades. The fastest way to misunderstand this business is to focus only on ticket sales. Admission creates the visit. The value of that visit continues changing after the guest enters. One family may arrive with discounted tickets purchased online. They pay for parking, rent a locker, buy lunch, purchase front-of-line access, play a midway game, order a photograph, and leave with a souvenir. Another family may enter with season passes, bring refillable bottles, avoid the games, and spend almost nothing beyond parking. Both families add the same number of people to attendance. They do not add the same amount of revenue. Recent filings from major North American operators show how important this difference is. Their total revenue per visit has recently ranged from roughly the low 60s to the high 70s in dollars, depending on the company and its mix of parks. A large share comes from food, merchandise, games, parking, premium products, and other spending beyond basic admission. That is why attendance cannot be the end of your dashboard. You need to know admission revenue per guest, spending inside the park, pass holder behavior, visit frequency, average length of stay, labor cost by operating hour, and sales by location. 10,000 additional visitors. Sound valuable until they arrive through aggressive discounts, overwhelm the kitchens, and leave before dinner. This channel is built around the gap between visible activity and owner economics. Subscribe for more breakdowns showing how familiar businesses collect revenue, absorb risk, and turn impressive sales into usable cash. Because a theme park becomes much more complicated when the same guest can be valuable in 5 different ways. Single-day visitors often produce the strongest admission yield. They may be tourists, occasional local guests, or families arriving for a special event. You collect more money for access, but you must persuade them to choose your park over every other use of their free time. Season passes behave differently. They bring in cash before or early in the season and make future attendance more predictable. They also reduce the effective admission collected each time the customer returns. The pass becomes attractive when repeat visits create food, parking, merchandise, or guest ticket sales. It becomes less attractive when frequent visitors consume ride capacity while buying very little. Dining plans also bring money in advance and can encourage longer visits. They create obligations at the same time. Meals must be available whenever pass holders arrive. Ingredient costs rise with usage. Kitchens can become congested at predictable times. Premium queue products sell scarce time rather than physical inventory. The margin can be attractive, but every priority guest affects the regular line. Sell too much priority access and the standard experience deteriorates. Parking requires relatively little labor once the lot already exists. An aggressive parking price, however, can make a family resistant to every purchase that follows. Food can produce substantial gross profit when the operation moves quickly. The price of a hamburger matters less if the line causes 50 customers to walk away. A shorter menu may improve throughput, simplify training, reduce spoilage, and allow several stands to use the same ingredients. The trade-off is that the park can begin to feel generic. Games and merchandise depend heavily on emotion. A generic stuffed animal competes with everything else a parent could buy. A product connected to the coaster a child finally had the courage to ride carries a story. The object may be almost the same. The willingness to pay is not. Corporate events, school groups, festivals, holiday programs, sponsorships, cabanas, lockers, and private rentals can monetize capacity the park has already built. The limitation is the calendar. An empty Tuesday in July cannot be stored and sold later. That creates one of the strangest economic truths in the business. More attendance helps until the park becomes too crowded to monetize that attendance properly. Imagine that your park can comfortably serve 20,000 guests in one day. Rideways remain acceptable. Restaurants process orders. Restrooms stay clean. Employees can still answer questions. At 24,000 guests, admission revenue increases. So do the lines. Guests complete fewer attractions. Food locations lose transactions. Customer service begins issuing recovery vouchers. At 28,000 guests, the property looks spectacular from above. Every walkway is full. Financially, the day may still underperform its potential. The crowd has consumed the thing the park is really selling: usable time. Capacity is more than the legal maximum number of people allowed inside. It is the number of guests the entire system can serve before the experience begins to break down. The lowest capacity component can control the park. It may be coaster trains, kitchen fryers, parking entrances, security screening, restrooms, shaded seating, or the number of trained operators available that morning. This is why one closed roller coaster matters so much. Suppose the ride normally serves 1,200 people per hour. A 6-hour closure removes more than 7,000 potential rides from the day. Those guests do not disappear. They enter other queues. Posted wait times rise across the property, and the park loses opportunities to sell food and retail during the hours guests now spend waiting. The coaster does not collect money directly from every rider. It protects the value of nearly everything that does. Once you understand that, buying the park begins to look different. A seller may advertise acreage, ride count, attendance, and revenue. You should begin with the ride files. Each major attraction has maintenance procedures, manufacturer requirements, replacement cycles, and specialized parts. You need to know which systems still receive manufacturer support and whether previous owners postponed major work. Then inspect the infrastructure beneath the attractions. Electrical distribution, water, drainage, kitchens, roofs, pavement, fire systems, and data networks can absorb millions of dollars without creating a headline the marketing department can use. Constructing a major regional park from scratch can require several years and hundreds of millions of dollars. Former Six Flags once estimated that building a park comparable to one of its major regional properties could cost roughly $500 million to $700 million and take at least 4 years. That estimate was made years ago, so it should not be treated as a current construction quote. It still demonstrates why established parks are difficult to replicate. Your acquisition may appear cheaper because you are buying yesterday's capital spending. The real question is how much of that spending will soon need to be repeated. Assume the negotiated purchase price is $120 million. That is an illustrative figure for this scenario, not a market average. The price includes the land, operating business, rides, buildings, parking areas, inventory, systems, and brand rights the seller actually controls. The inspection identifies $18 million of work needed during the first 2 years. That includes coaster refurbishment, roofs, refrigeration, ticketing systems, drainage, and a refreshed children's area, transaction costs, engineering, legal work, financing fees, marketing, working capital, and emergency reserves add another $14 million. The project that appeared to cost $120 million now requires $152 million. Suppose you contribute $72 million and borrow $80 million. With an illustrative 20-year loan at an annual rate of 8.25%, principal and interest would total about $8.3 million per year. Actual terms would depend on the collateral, lender, interest environment, operating history, and your experience. That payment begins whether the coaster sensor works or not. Expenses start months before the most profitable guests arrive. Mechanics rebuild components. Human resources recruits seasonal employees. Marketing sells passes. Buyers order supplies. Technology teams prepare ticketing and access control systems. Most regional parks earn a large share of their annual revenue during a relatively short period. Six Flags reported that about 70% of its attendance and revenue in 2025 occurred during the second and third quarters. That concentration gives summer weekends unusual financial importance. A lost peak season day cannot always be replaced by adding another operating day in November. Safety oversight also varies by location. Fixed-site rides are generally regulated through state and local systems rather than the federal framework applied to mobile carnival rides. The owner must follow the requirements of the park's jurisdiction, along with manufacturer procedures, insurer expectations, and widely used technical standards covering design, operation, maintenance, and inspection. The hidden cost is the discipline required to make those inspections meaningful. Technicians need training, parts need traceability, work orders need documentation, managers need the authority to keep an attraction closed. Even a documentation problem can prolong downtime, spread congestion, increase guest compensation, and remove the attraction that marketing promised. Insurance follows a similar pattern. You need property coverage, liability protection, workers' compensation, cyber insurance, vehicle policies, and business interruption coverage. Some losses may fall inside deductibles or self-insured layers. A larger insurance premium is visible on the income statement. The cash that must remain available for uncovered risk is easier to overlook. Labor has another complication. A theme park needs more than a large number of employees. It needs the correct trained employees in the correct zones at the correct hours. A shortage of ride operators can leave attractions closed. A shortage of cooks limits food sales. A shortage of lifeguards reduces water park capacity. Cutting payroll without understanding these dependencies can reduce revenue faster than costs. The expense many new buyers underestimate is replacement capital. Routine maintenance keeps an existing attraction operating. Capital spending replaces or substantially improves assets. Both consume cash, although they appear differently in accounting reports. A park can show healthy earnings before depreciation while its rides, roofs, pavement, kitchens, and technology move steadily toward replacement. Subscribe if you value this kind of distinction, because separating accounting profit from the cash needed to renew a business is one of the most important skills in evaluating any asset-heavy company. The danger becomes clearer when one ordinary disruption begins affecting several departments. Assume your signature coaster develops a control system issue in early June. The replacement component must come from a specialized supplier. The ride closes for 3 weekends, but the rest of the park remains open. Attendance falls only 8%. That does not sound catastrophic. The guests who still arrive face longer waits elsewhere. Some shorten their visit and skip dinner. Premium queue sales become harder to manage because the remaining high-demand rides have less available capacity. Customer service distributes meal vouchers. Online reviews begin mentioning the closure. Marketing responds with discounts. Admission revenue per guest falls. The promotions attract more price-sensitive visitors who may spend less inside the park. Labor cannot be reduced immediately because schedules were already posted and training costs have already been incurred. The repair bill arrives at the same time as the revenue decline. Season pass renewals then begin more slowly. That matters because advanced sales help finance off-season work. You draw more heavily on the credit line during winter. Interest expense rises. A planned restaurant renovation is delayed to protect liquidity. The following season, food throughput remains weak because the old kitchen never received the upgrade. The original failure involved one electronic system. The financial damage moved through attendance, guest satisfaction, discounts, per capita spending, financing, and the next year's capital plan. Weather can produce an even faster chain reaction. Forecasts influence family decisions before rain begins. Seasonal workers have already been scheduled. Prepared food may be wasted. If the storm arrives during a holiday weekend, the park loses one of a limited number of peak earning opportunities. Every roller coaster can be perfectly maintained and still produce no revenue under the wrong conditions. This cost structure creates operating leverage. A large portion of expenses remains in place when attendance declines. That makes a strong year powerful because additional revenue can rise faster than costs. It also makes a moderate decline painful because the park cannot shrink quickly enough. The property may still look healthy. Thousands of guests continue arriving. The rides continue operating. The income statement weakens underneath the noise. A recent Six Flags portfolio decision shows another layer of ownership that customers rarely consider. Six Flags America in Bowie, Maryland operated through the 2025 season and then closed. The company's annual filing described a property of roughly 500 acres being marketed for redevelopment as part of a broader portfolio strategy. The company did not frame the decision as proof that every regional park was unattractive. It was evaluating what that specific property and its capital could contribute inside a much larger portfolio. Then, in April 2026, Six Flags completed the sale of 6 other United States parks to EPR Properties. A separate operator was brought in to run those parks while EPR became the real estate owner. The transaction separated 3 things guests often assume belong together: the land, the operating company, and the brand. The property owner can collect contractual rent while the operator runs the guest business without tying up as much capital in land. Rent then becomes another fixed claim on operating cash, and the lease must clearly assign responsibility for improvements. The lesson for your acquisition is not that you should copy that transaction. It is that the phrase, owning a theme park, may hide several legal and financial structures. You could own both the land and the operation. You could lease the property. You could own the real estate and hire an operator. You could license a brand. Each arrangement changes control, financing, tax treatment, exit options, and the amount of cash that must remain in the business. Strong operators improve the model by managing flow before chasing raw attendance. They study when guests arrive, where they stop, how long transactions take, and which attraction closures create the largest secondary effects. A faster security entrance increases usable time inside the park. Better mobile ordering can increase food sales, but only if the kitchen has enough physical capacity. Adding digital demand without improving production simply creates a more organized delay. Ride reliability receives the same attention. Preventive maintenance is scheduled around the economic importance of each attraction, not merely its age. Critical parts are stocked when supplier lead times create unacceptable risk. Cross-training helps the park move qualified employees when demand shifts. Although training costs money and takes time, pricing becomes more precise. Peak days carry stronger prices, while promotions move demand toward quieter dates. The goal is to improve attendance, admission yield, and in-park spending without damaging customer trust. Season passes are designed around behavior. Free parking may increase repeat visits, but remove a profitable revenue stream. Dining discounts may create loyalty while overwhelming kitchens. Blackout dates protect peak capacity, but make the pass less appealing. Every benefit has a financial purpose and an operational consequence. The calendar becomes a portfolio of products. Halloween events, holiday programs, school groups, and corporate rentals extend the use of expensive assets. Each one still requires entertainment, security, utilities, staffing, and marketing. Experienced owners also protect capital reserves. Major ride components, roofs, kitchens, pavement, and technology do not last forever. Without a replacement cycle, the park can remain open while slowly becoming less competitive. Debt stays below the maximum a lender may be willing to offer. Less leverage reduces returns in a spectacular year, but improves the chance of surviving an ordinary bad one. In a seasonal business, liquidity buys time. Now put those ideas into one complete acquisition. Your hypothetical park covers about 75 developed acres and controls additional land around the parking area. It offers 3 major roller coasters, 25 family and children's rides, a small water park section, 18 food locations, games, shops, and seasonal events. The schedule includes roughly 150 operating days. The total project cost is $152 million. Your equity contribution is $72 million. Debt provides $80 million, creating annual principal and interest of approximately $8.3 million. In a normal year, the park records 1.25 million visits. Average admission and parking revenue equals $38 per visit. Food, beverages, games, retail, lockers, premium access, and other in-park purchases add another $32. Total spending connected to attendance is $70 per visit. Multiply $70 by 1.25 million visits, and you receive $87.5 million. Sponsorships, private events, and other revenue add $2.5 million. Total annual revenue reaches $90 million. That is the money collected by the park. It is not the amount left for you. Food, merchandise, game prizes, payment fees, and other costs directly linked to sales consume about $10 million. Seasonal wages, payroll taxes, and employee benefits require $15 million. Full-time management, maintenance leadership, administration, and year-round staff cost $9 million. Routine ride maintenance, parts, contracted engineering, landscaping, and facility repairs take $8 million. Utilities and waste services use $4 million. Insurance, safety programs, and claims-related costs require $3 million. Marketing takes $5 million. Technology, security, property taxes, licenses, professional services, cleaning supplies, and other overhead consume $13.5 million. Operating expenses total $67.5 million. Subtract that from $90 million in revenue, and the park produces $22.5 million before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. This measure is commonly called EBITDA. It describes operating performance before several important ownership costs. The lender receives about $8.3 million. You set aside $7.5 million for recurring capital projects, major ride work, pavement, roofs, kitchens, and technology. About $6.7 million remains before income taxes and changes in working capital. That $6.7 million is closer to ownership cash flow, but it still needs interpretation. If you personally serve as chief executive and replace a manager whose compensation was already included in expenses, part of the money you receive is paid for your labor. It is not entirely a return on the $72 million invested. Debt principal included in the annual payment builds equity, but it is not cash available for distribution. Land appreciation may increase the eventual sale price, but it cannot fund current payroll without a sale or refinancing. The normal year cash yield on your original equity is a little above 9% before taxes under these assumptions. That result may be attractive, but it depends on the park actually funding its capital reserve. Remove that reserve from the calculation and the apparent return rises sharply. The property also begins borrowing from its own future. The operating break-even point is much lower than the ownership break-even point. With these assumptions, ordinary park operations may cover themselves at around 850,000 visits. Once debt service and required reinvestment are included, the park needs closer to 1.1 million visits before it stops consuming owner cash. A seller can truthfully say the park has positive operating earnings while the buyer still faces a weak investment after financing and renewal spending. The distance between those two break-even points is where many acquisition models become overly optimistic. A strong year changes the result quickly. Good weather lands on the most important weekends. The signature coaster runs reliably. A Halloween event performs above plan. Attendance rises to 1.38 million visits, while better pricing and food throughput lift average spending to $73. Attendance-related revenue reaches a little more than $100 million. Sponsorships and events lift total revenue to roughly $104 million. Payroll, inventory, entertainment, maintenance, and other costs rise, bringing operating expense to about $72 million. Operating profit before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization approaches $32 million. After the $8.3 million debt payment and $8 million of capital spending, more than $15 million remains before taxes and working capital changes. The rise did not double. The park did not become twice as large. Several moderate improvements happened together. More guests arrived. Each guest spent slightly more. The fixed cost base changed relatively little. The difficult year works in reverse. Attendance falls to 1.08 million after poor weather, stronger competition, and repeated downtime on a major attraction. Discounts reduce average spending to $67. Attendance-related revenue falls to a little more than $72 million. Other revenue brings the total to approximately $74 million. You reduce seasonal labor, food purchases, entertainment, and advertising. Many costs remain. Full-time employees, maintenance, insurance, property obligations, technology, and much of the utility infrastructure cannot shrink in proportion to attendance. Operating expense declines to about $63 million. The park still reports roughly $11 million of operating profit before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That number sounds reassuring until the lender receives $8.3 million and essential capital work requires another $7 million. Ownership cash flow becomes negative by roughly $4 million before taxes. Nothing dramatic has to appear from the highway. The parking lot still fills on selected weekends. The roller coasters still operate. More than 1 million visits still occur. The difference comes from 3 ordinary variables moving together: attendance, spending per guest, and ride reliability. That is the financial personality of a theme park. The same fixed cost structure that makes a good summer extremely rewarding can turn an ordinary disappointment into a cash shortage. By this point, the roller coaster restraint from early morning should look different. To the guest, it is one small part of the ride. To you, it connects maintenance records, trained labor, attraction capacity, queue length, food sales, customer trust, insurance, and the decision to reopen. A theme park can be an excellent investment for an owner with patient capital, operational depth, disciplined maintenance, and enough liquidity to treat safety and reinvestment as non-negotiable. It becomes dangerous when a buyer values the property through attendance alone, finances the acquisition around an optimistic summer, or distributes cash that should have renewed the rides. For more documentaries examining familiar businesses from the owner's side of the transaction, subscribe. The entrance people recognize is rarely where the most important financial decisions are made. When the gates open, guests will hear music and look toward the tallest coaster. You will be watching the loading platform, the kitchen lines, the weather radar, and the cash reserve. Owning the park means making sure every restraint can lock, every operating hour can be used, and enough of today's excitement remains in the bank to open the gates again next season.